Imagine sitting in a quiet office, staring at the same line of code or the same customer service ticket as the person next to you. You both have the same degree, the same skills, and you're working for the exact same company. But when the clock hits 5, you walk out into two completely different universes. One of you is worried if a $4 coffee will trigger a $35 overdraft fee, while the other is deciding which city to visit for a long weekend. This isn't just about being lucky or working harder. It's about a hidden pay gap that spans across 10 different economic realities, where the exact same job can mean the difference between surviving a loop of debt or owning your own time. This is the story of how the world really works, from $20,000 to $1 million, and the invisible architecture that decides who you are the moment you open your banking app. Let's start in the first country, the land of $10 an hour. Our main character, we'll call him Elias, is here. He's a remote worker, and on paper, he's doing okay. But the math of this country is brutal. At $20,000 a year, every single decision is a trade. It's gas or groceries. It's the phone bill or the one pair of shoes that's been falling apart since March. Elias knows his hourly rate not because he's proud of it, but because it follows him everywhere. It's there at the grocery store when he's looking at the bottom shelf for the cheapest rice and ramen. He isn't choosing these things because he likes them. The number is choosing for him. One afternoon, he's at the register buying a loaf of bread and some toothpaste. The total is $11.40. He swipes his card and it declines. It's not because he doesn't have the money, it's because the transfer he made this morning hasn't cleared yet. He has to step aside, feeling something inside him shrink while the cashier and the person behind him wait. In this country, you don't manage money. Money manages you. Then Elias looks at a colleague in the second country, where the salary is $35,000. This is the first place that feels like stability. For the first time, Elias could have his own apartment, a small kitchen, a door that locks, and a silence that belongs entirely to him. He can fill his gas tank all the way to the top without watching the pump like a hawk. But even here, the hidden architecture of the bank is watching. This is the level where the system is most expensive. If Elias makes a $4 mistake on a coffee he forgot was scheduled to charge, the bank doesn't see a human error. They see a $35 opportunity. Suddenly, that $4 coffee costs $77 because of fees he can't reverse. He tries to call, but he's stuck in a loop of hold music. The voice on the other end reads from a script. They tell him someone will call back in 48 hours, but nobody ever does. At this level, Elias isn't a customer. He's a risk score with shoes. He's moved through the system like luggage on a belt, ignored unless he breaks a rule. As Elias moves his career into the third country, the $50,000 mark, he hits the average. This is where most people land. His fridge is full, and he can go to dinner without checking his balance first. But this country is a mirror. He realizes that if he stays here for 30 years, the end is survivable but not exciting. It's a slow disappointment that seeps in like a draft through a window. He sees colleagues in the fourth country making $75,000 and everything changes. At this level, money finally gets quiet. He isn't thinking about the cost of groceries anymore. He's thinking about what he actually wants to do with his day. But even as the money gets quiet, the distance between him and his old friends starts to grow. It's not about arguments, it's about the silences. He stops mentioning his new apartment because it feels like a language his friends back in the first country didn't ask to hear. By the time Elias reaches the fifth country, the six-figure mark of $100,000, he realizes that this destination he chased for years is actually just a door. In a big city, this is survival money dressed in a nice title. Everyone suddenly has an opinion on his money. Family calls more often, and everyone has a great idea for him to invest in. But the biggest shift happens in the sixth country at $150,000. This is where he stops relating to money problems entirely. He forgets what it feels like to worry about a bill, and that forgetting creates a gap. When a friend asks to borrow money, it's a small amount to him, but everything to them. They live in the same city, but they are now using different math to calculate their lives. The seventh country is the world of $250,000. Here, the language changes. He's no longer talking about savings accounts. He's talking about tax optimization and asset allocation. His accountant costs more than his first car did. He's at dinners where nobody checks the bill, not to show off, but because cost has stopped being a variable in the equation. But as the salary goes up, the circle gets smaller. The room gets quieter. He looks back at the person he was, eating ramen between shifts, and he doesn't know how to explain this life to that version of himself without sounding like someone he used to resent. Then comes the eighth country, $500,000. The bank stops being a place he visits and becomes a service that comes to him. A wealth manager drives to his office. They don't try to sell him products, they offer consultations. He's invited to private dinners where money is never mentioned, because money is the table, not the conversation. At this level, he's no longer a customer. He's an asset the bank protects. If a wire transfer freezes, it's fixed in one phone call with no hold music. The system that used to charge him $35 for being broke is now competing to keep him. The ninth country is private banking at $5 million. Here, the rules aren't just followed, they're negotiated. His banker knows his children's names and his plans for a foundation. The interest rate on his mortgage isn't a public number, it's a private deal. He sits in conference rooms with no logos on the door, discussing investments that will never appear on a public prospectus. The bank doesn't follow rules for him, it bends them. Finally, he reaches the 10th country, the $25 million relationship. At this level, Elias isn't just a client, he's a partner. Losing his account would affect people's careers. He doesn't apply for things, things apply for him. The chief investment officer of the bank flies out to ask for his opinion on the market. He is now shaping the very institution that once let his rent payment fail over a $4 mistake. The turning point for Elias didn't happen when he hit $1 million. It happened back in his 30s when he only had $214 in his account. He was sitting at a warped laminate countertop, looking at a spreadsheet of his failures. He realized he had been going backward by $261 every month. That was the breakthrough. He stopped lying to himself about the numbers. He started the unsexy work of turning that $214 into a $1,000 emergency fund. He sold a jacket he bought just to look successful. He picked up extra shifts he was overqualified for, feeling a quiet embarrassment. But then the breakthrough became physical. His car made a grinding groan on a cold February morning. The repair was $2,300. A few years ago, that would have been a crisis that sent him into a spiral of debt. But this time, he had the money. He felt something steadier than happiness in that cold parking lot. He felt control. He realized that wealth isn't about the number of cars or the luxury vacations. It's about the shift in his brain. He started thinking in years instead of 30-day cycles. When he stood in a store needing a coffee maker, he didn't just grab the $39 one. He did the math on cost per use and bought the $119 one with the 5-year warranty. The wiring of his brain had changed. This change in wiring is what allowed him to survive a layoff scare without panic, and to tell his mother he'd take care of her leaking roof without hesitation. That is the real impact of closing the pay gap. It's the ability to show up for the people you love without it costing you your stability. By the time he turned 40, he wasn't a millionaire, but he had $200,000 in liquid wealth. He was 6 times ahead of the average person his age, not because of luck, but because he automated his behavior before the motivation even arrived. He stayed in the market when his nervous system was screaming at him to run. The hidden pay gap isn't just about the money you make. It's about how the world treats you based on what's next to your name. You are the same person at every balance, but the system decides who you are. The bank that will one day fly out to ask your opinion is the same one currently charging you for not having enough. The gap is real, and the architecture is hidden, but the moment you refuse to look away from the numbers, the future stops being something that happens to you. It becomes something you've started.